Brothers and sisters, today for the Dominican Order is a great joy because we celebrate the feast of our Seraphic Mother, St. Catherine of Siena. Seraphic comes from the highest choirs of angels, the Seraphim, that the scriptures speak about, and they're so close to the throne of God that they just burn on fire. So they're depicted in art as just being on fire, just in the presence of God, just being burning with love, so close to the Lord. And the more we get close to God in this life, and just like St. Catherine of Siena, to really live a life centered on the gospel, to live a life centered on Christ, to live a life of discipline, spiritual discipline and penance, in terms of, really disciplining our desires, directing them more towards God, then it ought to lead for us to burn with a greater love, greater generosity and kindness and peace, the burning peace that comes from a fulfillment of heart, that when God fills the heart is full and complete. I heard once that peace means nothing is missing, that it means, perfection, it means fulfillment. And I suppose sign of peace is in our hearts and our lives is a sign of greater and greater fullness of when our hearts are full of God. And so St. Catherine of Siena, her heart burned with peace, but she longed to see this peace in the church. And one of the great images that she had for the church, which is a very typical traditional image from scripture, is the church as the bride of Christ. And of course, St. Paul reflects on the whole this mystery that God created of human marriage between a woman and a man, and that imagery of the woman being the bride, and that spousal love, that deep intimate union and communion between a husband and wife in the sacrament of marriage, which gives life to children and to in procreation. And so that image of the spouses coming together and a new life coming out, that's an image, it's an analogy, it's just an example of Christ and his church, that Christ gives us his very life, and in union with him, the church gives birth to us at the baptism font, where we're plunged into this new life of God, from the bride of the church. And we are, in that sense, a broad sense of that term bride, that we're all in this deep union with God through Christ. And so, but she was very much aware in the time of St. Catherine of Siena. I mean, there was corruption, there was the bride, she had dirt on her face, and she always has dirt on her face in one sense. The church is full of saints and sinners, and we're all sinners, and the church throughout the centuries has been exploited by her members to do all sorts of terrible sins. And this is not news. It's there in the gospel. There we see, Judas, what he did to the Lord, and we see constantly throughout history. And so St. Catherine shed many tears over the church. She would always write, "I'm a daughter of the church." She was proud to be part of this great mystery. And you hear me saying ad nauseum that the church is not just an institution. Church is something supernatural, mystical. She's a different reality. She's a new creation, and the church is the living continuation of Christ on earth, where he lives. He created this space and this sacred institution by which he would live and extend his works and his miracles throughout time, and through the sacraments and through the ministers and through all the baptized, all the sons and daughters of God made sons and daughters through Christ. And so St. Catherine of Siena, this bride, is one who's on making this journey to try and be faithful to her husband, the spouse, to God, to be faithful to God, because every sin is like adultery against God. Every sin is a infraction against our covenants of married love with God, in that sense. And so all sin is adultery. And so this bride, all of us, we're wayward, we're unfaithful, we're not faithful to this ever persistent, faithful, kind, merciful groom who takes back his bride again and again and is purifying her. And yesterday I was at this beautiful wedding of some dear friends of mine from Ireland. They got married here in Italy, in Rome. And when we were all waiting for the bride to come, I had this real beautiful insight meditating on the groom standing at the altar, a most wonderful groom, and his heart, he was in tears waiting. Could just feel that love in his heart, waiting for his bride, that just the waiting. And I started to meditate on the waiting. And I had this image of Christ in heaven at the altar, the supreme altar, waiting for his bride, the church, waiting for her, to be purified as she puts on her makeup, as she's, she's dressing, as she's getting ready to come and meet him at the altar. And this image of the church traveling through time and as a journeying to the altar of heaven, to meet the groom, Christ, who longs for her. And, so for us these days to feel like St. Catherine, St. Catherine no doubt experienced a great longing of Christ for her. And this longing, she was in touch with this longing of God for her heart to be wedded with her in deep love that inspired her to be the great mystic and contemplative that she was.